Hey, what's going on? I'm Josh Martinez from Z100 and iHeartRadio. This is becoming a monthly thing, and I'm not mad at it. My guest, yet again, Tony Khan. What's going on, man?
Hey, Josh. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be with you again.
No, absolutely. And there's a big night tonight, big event tonight. It's not every day you get a AEW World Heavyweight Championship match on free TV, but that's what we're getting tonight on TBS, 8 o'clock, live from Atlantic City. There's a lot of rich history in Atlantic City. So let's talk about the reason behind going to Atlantic City, and then we'll jump into the card.
Absolutely. Well, it's a great wrestling market. We have a lot of great fans in and around Atlantic City and around the Northeast. It's very accessible. We have a lot of fans driving in from all over, a lot of fans coming from Philadelphia, according to the statistics on the ticket buys. And so it should be a great group of fans tonight. It's also a rich wrestling history in Atlantic City, and also specifically the Boardwalk Hall where we'll be wrestling tonight on TBS. You know, there's been a couple of world title changes in Boardwalk Hall before. Macho Man Randy Savage won and lost the WWF title in this same building, Boardwalk Hall, and it bodes big ahead of the Texas Death Match tonight, Hangman Page versus Lance Archer for the world title of AEW. And there's just a lot of big surprises, big moments. In particular, I've announced a surprise debut on this show, and it's built a lot of buzz, and it's got people talking. And I'm just so excited for the excitement around tonight's show, and I'm excited for the wrestling matches and all the fun stuff we're going to do tonight on Dynamite.
So let's take this match by match. You mentioned obviously the Texas Death Match tonight between Adam Hangman Page and Lance Archer. Why, in your opinion, is Lance Archer currently the guy to be the number one contender against Hangman?
Well, Lance Archer was in a great position when he got injured last year. He was one of the top contenders, and he had done so much in 2021. He won the IWGP US title from Jon Moxley in a Texas Death Match. And Lance is kind of the modern master of that Texas Death Match. And when he came back, he's been on a tear since his return. He's undefeated in 2022. And we saw him beat up Frankie Kazarian a few weeks ago on Dynamite. We saw him then beat up the champion himself, Hangman Page, in an altercation on Dynamite. And Lance Archer, since he first arrived, has been one of the top wrestlers, and I think he would be a great world champion. We have a great world champion now with Hangman, and what really excites me is we've seen Lance already win a title on Dynamite, you know, from Jon Moxley, which is the tallest task in pro wrestling, to beat Jon Moxley, arguably. And we know Lance can do it. So, you know, to have that match and him going against Hangman Page, who has only had 2 defenses of the title so far, but they were both classic matches. The match where he won the title was also a classic. So Hangman's on a real hot streak. His last 3 matches for the title have all been incredible. And now a very different kind of match. It's a lot different than wrestling Kenny Omega at Full Gear to win the world championship, or wrestling Bryan Danielson in a long technical wrestling match that became so much more than that. But Lance Archer is just a very different wrestler than Danielson. You know, they're both great in their own ways, but physically they're totally different. So I think it's a really, really fun matchup tonight, and something for fans to look forward to. And I think there's going to be a lot for people to look forward to on tonight's Dynamite.
Now, was a match like that, would you rather, just from a strictly scheduling standpoint, is that a match you would want to put on first or last? Because I think nowadays the first match is just as important as the last in a lot of aspects. So is that something to look forward to, where we're going to start 8:01, we're going to start firing off, or do we have a different type of schedule for tonight?
It will be the main event tonight, and there'll be a lot of exciting things in the front end of the show. And I think a lot of what people are looking forward to, including a surprise debut and other fun things, are going to be leading up to that. And there's a lot on this show that has not been announced yet. And that's one of the things I think is really exciting about tonight. There's an element of mystery. There's obviously the surprise debut is a match where Isaiah Cassidy is going to be taking on somebody making their debut in AEW. And that person tonight arriving will be signing with AEW, and they're going to be a big part of our future. And Isaiah, of course, also a big part of our future, and he'll be a very tough opponent for them coming in. He had a great TNT title match on Rampage last week on TNT. And now I think Isaiah is going to make for a really tough opponent for this person making their debut tonight on Dynamite.
Now, I want to say that you coined the phrase forbidden door. I could be wrong on that, but I know the first time I kind of heard it came from you. Not sure if that was something that was used before I heard it from you. Do you think that that's a phrase that's being used way too often now, almost to the point of like an overkill?
We'll see tonight. I think by the time tonight's over, we'll see if it meets everybody's expectations. But I think tonight you will see the forbidden door open. You will see a big free agent signing. You'll get them both. And as to what that means, it's all tonight on one great show.
I mean, the term forbidden door has been used by other companies up to this point. And if there's
anything... But they won't be using it anymore because I've trademarked it. So...
So when we say that term will be used very strategically, you mean it in legal terms too. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's our expression, and it's ours to be used as we see fit. But I do appreciate the way the fans see it used, and I hear them. And so I think you'll get a great show tonight. And I think a lot of wrestling fans will be very happy by the end of Wednesday Night Dynamite on TBS tonight.
Now, before you made that announcement that there will be a signee against Isaiah Cassidy, qualifying, by the way, let's not forget, for the Face of the Revolution ladder match, I believe. Yep. With that being said, were you a little hesitant to put it out there and make it a big deal? Because once you set a certain bar, I mean, fans will just take it and run with it to the point where, you know, you're hearing just unbelievable names essentially being rumored from fans. So is that something that you're strategic about and when you place it, how you place it, or more importantly, how you say it?
Well, there's only so much I can do in tonight's 2-hour Dynamite, but there's a lot I can do in a 2-hour Dynamite too. So I will try to make a lot of fans happy tonight. And I also hear them on a lot of the people they'd like to see and a lot of their ideas for who they think would be a great person to join AEW. And that's one of the great things about this is it's opened the forbidden door to a lot of speculation, and I love it. And I think we'll hear a lot more from the fans in the weeks and months to come about who they'd like to see in AEW and what they'd like to see in AEW. And I think that's awesome. And we'll, you know, being able to get all this feedback from the fans because we have such an engaged audience of people around the world watching the show. It's huge. You know, there's regularly 1 million people or more who watch the show here in America live. And then there's numerous people who watch it on DVR. And then, of course, there's just thousands and thousands around the world also. So overall, I mean, we have this audience of millions of people around the world between TV and digital that follow our product and follow our wrestling. And right now, there's a lot of people on the edge of their seat about what they're going to see tonight. It has a big wrestling night feel, and I'm thrilled. I'm so happy that we can create that. As a wrestling fan, I know how fun that is, and I can feel it in the air tonight. People are really excited.
Now, you mentioned wrestling fun, and I think a lot of wrestling fans find stables to be fun. And tonight there's going to be an inner circle team meeting, if you will. What are your thoughts behind everything that's kind of happening between Jericho, Proud and Powerful, and then also how Sammy and I don't know where Jake Hager's been, but also just the combination of those five having this team meeting tonight? What's to be expected from that?
Well, it's a great question, and I think we'll find out tonight. We've seen the issues between Jericho and Proud and Powerful, and we've seen issues between Jericho and their friend Eddie Kingston. I think there's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot of questions to answer tonight in that team meeting. Of course, last week we saw Jericho demanded this meeting after a week prior when Santana and Ortiz would not tag him in during their trios match. That was his comeback match, and he was really upset about it. And I think, there's going to be a lot to unfold tonight in that team meeting. So that's definitely something to look forward to. And there's a lot of interest in stables in pro wrestling. And I think there were a number of other things that got people very interested on the road to Revolution last week. Of course, there was a lot of interest, I think, in Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley, and what Bryan Danielson's had to say. Ever since Jon Moxley came back to AEW, Bryan Danielson has been a constant presence after his matches. And finally, he spoke his mind this past Wednesday after Moxley versus Wheeler Yuta. We finally heard what Danielson had to say to Moxley, and it was a very interesting offer. And that also really got the wrestling fans talking, which is very interesting.
And I think the most fun part of that was the realism, where there wasn't this dynamic of only mentioning a babyface or a heel. Bryan Danielson was just very honest in his assessment of what the two of them can be, almost a up-to-date two-man power trip, maybe even more dominant. So that'll be interesting to see what steps are taken tonight. You did mention Bryan Danielson, which I got to give credit to. I believe it was Sports Illustrated. You spoke about Bryan Danielson working with the TBS champion, Jade Cargill. Was there any specific reason why Danielson was the guy? I mean, I know that he's obviously one of the all-time greats, but why specifically Danielson above anyone else that could work with Jade back in the back?
Yeah, I made that call because I think he's one of the greatest pro wrestlers of all time. And he's got such a great mind and such great commitment to wrestling. I know he thinks about it when he's not at the building. He researches it. He watches a ton of wrestling. And as a student of wrestling, I think he's also a great teacher. And Jade is such a great talent at such a young wrestling career. She hasn't been in the ring that long, but she's accomplished a lot. And I think she has more potential than anybody. And that's why I asked Danielson to mentor her. And that's why I asked her to work with Danielson. And they've had a great chemistry working together. And I think it bodes really well for her future that she's got someone with so much knowledge invested in her success. So, behind the camera, he has helped out a lot, and she's got a lot of great mentors working with her, really great coaching. And I think it's, very, very exciting. And also that's one of the things I'm looking forward to about tonight is what's next for Jade, who is 26-0 as a pro wrestler on such a dominant run. And, since the last time I talked to you, Josh, she's gotten even stronger and picked up more wins, and she's gotten better. I thought her match with Anna Jay, her first title defense, was her best match yet. And I think she keeps getting better, and I'm very excited what's ahead for Jade as she defends that TBS championship.
I mean, I think it's safe to say that she's on her way to stardom, and she's a star. And she kind of broke that, 2021. Could you kind of give us a male, female, and tag teams to look at for 2022 when in regards to breaking out?
Oh, it's a great question. I think Daniel Garcia is a singles wrestler who has a big future, who has had a great 2021, but has a chance to have a better 2022. He wrestled a lot of the top stars in 2021. And now the records have reset, and he's come out and had a hot start in 2022. So I think Daniel Garcia is definitely somebody to watch for the future. Also, in women's wrestling, we've seen Layla Hirsch change her attitude, and she's gotten a lot better. Ever since that episode of Rampage on Christmas where she went off on Chris Statlander, she's really changed her attitude, and she's a very competitive person, and she's, I think, become an even better wrestler in the recent weeks. And We've seen that really aggressive side of her. She picked up a big win a few weeks ago over Red Velvet. And following that match, you know, we've seen her rivalry with Chris Statlander has picked up. So I think Layla Hirsch is somebody to keep an eye on. Of course, Red Velvet herself, also a great pro wrestler who has made great strides to keep an eye on. And above all else, I think, you know, Jade, she's the TBS champion now, and she's only going to get better. So there's a lot to keep an eye on there. In terms of tag teams, I think the Acclaimed have come so far, and to come from wrestling as individuals on AEW Dark to becoming an established team, and now a team that has been in the main events on more than one occasion on Dynamite and Rampage, and perennial contenders. So I think they're one example, but there's a lot of great examples of, you know, tag teams and singles wrestlers that are on the rise.
I'm happy you mentioned the Acclaim, because I got a little bit of a complaint. I got to make a complaint. All right. I got you on the line. I gotta be honest here. Okay. I'm a huge fan of Max Caster's raps. Huge fan. Anthony Bowen's got to stop hyping him up into the camera. The audio is getting picked up and I can't hear the raps.
Really?
Yeah, that's my one little complaint. I literally, anytime over the last few, I would say month or two that the Acclaimed have come out, I have literally put my head down to not watch the screen so that I could like concentrate more on the audio of what Max is saying. So, you know, you may want to pull it up on YouTube and you'll and put on some headphones or something. You'll see what I'm saying, because Anthony is in the camera. Bowens is in the camera shouting, cutting into the lines. And I want to hear punchlines. I'm a hip hop head. You know what I'm saying? I want to have some fun too. So just
okay. Yeah. I will check on that. Anthony is a big personality. He's a wrestler who's definitely on the rise. I'll pay attention to that and make sure you're getting the most out of Max Caster's raps going forward.
Huge fan of it. Otherwise, huge fan of that act. Another thing that I'm a huge fan of, and I think I'm, according to the sound of the crowd, I'm in a minority here. Huge fan of Dan Lambert and what he's been able to do. I've noticed that Dan Lambert, American Top Team, they've been on TV a lot more. Last week, Paige Van Zandt got physical with Brandy. Is that something that you guys are looking to do with more of the quote-unquote outside stars coming into the AEW ring? Are you guys looking for that, or is that something that falls in your lap, feels comfortable, let's go with it?
Well, Dan is a friend of mine, and where Dan goes, a lot of the top stars in mixed martial arts go with him. You know, we've seen big names like Paige Van Zandt last week, or Junior Dos Santos, and Andrei Arlovsky, and of course, Jorge Masvidal, where they've come to AEW Dynamite to defend Dan, to attack the AEW wrestlers. So we've had big names from MMA, big names from sports like Mike Tyson and Shaquille O'Neal. We've probably never had a better guest in AEW than Shaq. He was so great on every level to us, and not just a hard worker and put in a great wrestling match, but also backstage, the most humble person we've ever had in the history of the company in terms of coming in. He went around and thanked every wrestler, and it was unbelievable to all these pro wrestlers to have Shaq coming up to them and saying nice things, but also saying, I did my best out there. I hope I didn't embarrass anybody. I just want to make pro wrestling look good because I like wrestling. And to hear that from Shaq, of all people, one of the biggest sports stars of all time, one of the greatest athletes ever, that was so cool. And we've, had great entertainers come into AEW, including Snoop Dogg and many others. So I always love having crossover opportunities to get big stars in. And of course, you mentioned Dan Lambert, and yeah, where Dan goes, a lot of the top MMA names, a lot of the top fighters are going to go where he is.
Was there a plan to get Masvidal in the ring? Because it seemed like there was an angle, and then there was he was announced to fight. So things he just I don't want to say disappeared, but I'm sure there's more to it. But to a fan, he's there and then disappears. Is there something that scheduling couldn't line up? Is that something that we're looking forward to down the road that was meant to be this 2-3 time thing, wait, and then come back?
Well, I do think it's still a possibility. I mean, we've established the American Top Team fighters are very dangerous, and we, did get Junior Dos Santos in the ring, and
Yep.
Andrei Arlovsky's gone out and beat people up. So I do think there's a constant threat. And of course, Paige Van Zandt had been around AEW before, and now she's back. So it's something to keep an eye on, and we'll have to see how Masvidal's fight schedule lines up. But I would certainly be open to it in the future. But he's got to make the UFC a priority too. I really like those guys at the UFC. Dana has been so good to me. Dana White and Hunter Campbell are great executives, and I really have a lot of respect for the UFC. So it just depends on what his schedule is like, but it's something I would love.
Now, you mentioned before, the superstar crossover. You mentioned Snoop. We'll see him this Sunday at the Super Bowl performing, huge stage. But you obviously, you have tight connections. You work with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm just curious, do you have a prediction for this Sunday's game?
I cannot do that. But short of making that prediction, I will be there, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to a time when Trevor Lawrence and the Jags can hopefully hit that stage and play there ourselves at some point. But I will be there, and I always love football, and I'll be there scouting the game with my notebook as I do every year.
I love that. I before coming back to New York City, I lived in Cincinnati. I ran stations in Cincinnati, so I have close ties to Cincinnati. So I'm kind of tipping my hand a little bit, but that's who I'm rooting for. I have dear close friends that are diehard Bengals fans, so that's where I'm leaning. Just speaking with my heart above my head, to be quite honest. Now, you did mention obviously the Jags. You guys have the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. Has the team kind of began the process of nailing it down to maybe a final 15 or 20 at the moment of what you guys want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a ton of scouting and college scouting throughout the past year, and really not just the final year of these players' careers, but all, their entire career. So we have a lot of scouting info, and now is the time when everybody's really digging in, trying to nail down who the best players are. And the NFL Combine is coming up. At the NFL Combine, we'll learn even more about these players. Of course, we just had Senior Bowl week, these All-Star games. You learn a little bit more, get to do some interviews, and check out the players as they practice and play. And now I think the Combine is the next piece of the puzzle, and the pro days. And it's a long, long process. And just like you're a huge lover of the draft, I am too. And I work really hard on it. And specifically, the focus that I have been able to do some good things with is at the end of the draft, I've signed undrafted free agents. So there are a number of players in the NFL who they got their start when I called them after the draft, and they signed up with the Jags when I called them. And there's some players that are still on the Jags, like running back James Robinson, who's been great for us, and Trey Herndon, Brandon Rusnick, defensive backs who came in undrafted for us. And those are players I signed. And specifically in the Super Bowl, one player who I found and actually called him, and that's where he got his start in the NFL, is Mike Hilton, who plays for the Bengals.
Hot corner.
Yeah, I found Mike Hilton, signed him, and our management then cut him, and I wish they hadn't, but that was a past regime. But Mike Hilton, a good player for the Bengals, and that's another good example of the stuff I tried to lock down after the draft. And James Robinson, as I mentioned, has been a good player for us. And so at the end of this year's draft and every draft, I'm on the phone trying to lock down the best players who slipped through the draft. And that's one of my favorite focuses too.
Are you more of the best available or the best fit, most needs guy?
It depends. It depends on what you have at the position. I think there's not such a rigid philosophy, but you do need to fill your needs, and you need to fill your needs of the best available players. So I think it's about the context of what your roster looks like.
All right, now we'll jump back into wrestling. I mean, that's why we're here. I'm just genuinely, like I said, a draft fan, and you guys holding the number 1 overall pick is kind of exciting. It's not every day you get to talk to someone with so much power, within the league. So before we wrap things up, Rampage is going to be moved to a different time for one night only, correct?
Yeah, that is true. And we'll see how we do in that time slot. It'll be a lot of fun.
So that's going to be happening because of the NBA AllStar Weekend. There's nothing bad. It's just NBA AllStar Weekend. And you guys are moving to 7 p.m., one night only on TNT. And that is next Friday, I believe.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to see how we do in that slot. It'll be really interesting.
I like that. Nice little tease.
Well, it'll be, I think a lot of people are fascinated by it. So this week we're still on at 10 o'clock on Friday night. And next week it'll be a little bit different. And of course, tonight we're on 8 p.m. on TBS. And I came on with you, Josh, to talk about that move to TBS. And since the last time I saw you, it's been great for us. We've done really well on TBS. And I think tonight, with all the anticipation for this big surprise debut and a lot more to come tonight, including a world championship match, the Texas death match with Hangman Page versus Lance Archer. There's so much on the horizon in AEW. And I think tonight's got that feel. It feels like a big night of pro wrestling. It's in the air. And, anybody who can access TBS, anybody with cable or a streaming package that includes TBS, we want you to please check out AEW Dynamite tonight.
Now, before we let you go, what can we expect from AEW moving forward in 2022?
You can expect a lot. There'll be more great wrestling. We've already had some great matches to start this year. Some of the best matches you could ever have, we've already had in just a very short time. And the year is very young, and there's still so much to come. I think we're going to have a great year of Dynamite on TBS. We're going to have a great year of Rampage on Fridays on TNT. But I think starting tonight will set the tone for the year. There's going to be big surprises. There'll be new arrivals. The roster is going to keep getting stronger. The matches will, continue having big, fresh matches on TV and on pay-per-view. You mentioned as we lead into Double or Nothing, Revolution is up next. We're on the road to Revolution. But then Double or Nothing will also feature the Owen Hart Cup. And I'm very excited for those tournament finals that we'll have at Double or Nothing. So a lot to look forward to. And then we'll come back around and have a great summer and do some of the things we did last year and hopefully do them even better. Have a great a great full year. And we've really settled into a great calendar of pro wrestling events. And I think the anticipation I feel for tonight's show is something that I think bodes really well for this year. It's, there's people that want to know who's coming to AEW, who's arriving and making their debut tonight on TBS. And it's only the start, it's just their debut. And we'll have more great debuts and more great moments to look forward to in AEW.
Love it. One more time, Tony Khan, thank you so much, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks for having me on to promote Dynamite.
Always. Tonight, TBS, Atlantic City, Boardwalk Hall, and at some point in 2022, they'll be back in New York City just because I'm hoping.
I think that's a good bet.